Okay, hi there. We're going to go ahead and lay out the tails, and in order to do that we need to make a decision, and that decision is how many tails do we want. And in this case I am going to go with just one, and the reasons why, number one, it's going to be plenty of strength. We're going to have this edge glued to the base along the bottom, which is where the majority of the strength is going to come from. Secondly, I just think it would look appropriate on this piece. That's probably not appropriate for a drawer or a box or something like that. You might want two, or actually you might even want three on a piece that's 4 inches wide. But on this, rustic piece we have here, I think one is appropriate, so that's what I'm going to go with. And if it looks terrible, oh well. It's not going to look terrible. It's just not. It's going to look good, I promise. Okay, we've got both boards in the vise here. I usually mark and cut dovetails with the inside on the inside of the bench. That way I can see the line on the outside the best, and that's the show side, so you make sure you don't go past that line when you're cutting. Now to lay these out, since we're only going to have one tail in this board, the only dimension we need to care about is the outside half pin. So, it's not an exact science. It's sort of one of those things, do what looks good. And in this case, probably gonna make it, well, we can take our sideboard here and look at that and say, okay, well, we definitely want the half pin within at least, it needs to be at least that wide there, right? If it's not, then it could interfere with our bottom board. We're going to make it just a little bit wider maybe than that bottom board, so something like that. Let's see how that looks on the piece here. So we've got one side, we'll mark, and the other side. Okay, so that means our tail, our one tail is going to be pretty wide. I might want it just a little bit narrower than that, so widen these out slightly. How about right there? There's one mark and there's two marks. So then if we come in and draw that across, just like that, that's going to be our tail here. So the waist is going to be the outside pieces, and that's going to be our tail. Let's go ahead and draw the rest of the marks on it. And the little gauge I have here has a 1 in 5 and a 1 in 8. 1 in 5 would typically be used for softwoods, 1 in 8 for hardwoods. In this case, since we only have one tail, I want it to be somewhat pronounced. We're going to use 1 in 5. So go ahead and draw those on now. And I'll do this side, and then I'll also do the other side as well, just so you can see it here. So we're gonna have one that starts here down to the line, and another that starts here down to the line. Mark the waist. So let's bring you in a little bit here. So there you can kind of see where the tail is going to be. That's not too bad. Actually, you know what? Thinking about it, I actually kind of like it better where I had it the first time. So maybe we'll do this again, and that's okay. Let's see which one we like better. This is definitely a trial and error process, so don't be afraid to go in and remark if you don't like how something looks. If the proportionality doesn't quite look right, go ahead and redo it. Change it to something else and see how it looks. And if you don't like that, redo it again until you do. And that's the only way to ensure that you get a final product that you're satisfied with. So take off that. Take off that. We're back to where we started. Let's see how that looks. Okay, yeah, that feels better to me. I like that a little bit better. So we're gonna go with that dimension there. We'll go ahead and mark out the other board and then get to sawing. Okay, there we go. So we've marked out both boards and we've identified the waist to make sure we don't take out the wrong section of this board when the time comes. And next thing to do is to cut these out. We'll go ahead and make these cuts. So just follow the line. The critical dimension here is your cut through the wood. It's not as critical to follow the angle as it is the perpendicular portion of this cut. What I mean by that, if you take a square now and put it up on your workpiece, how close is that? And as you can see, this isn't perfect, and I'm trying to hold it as light as I can, not influence it one way or the other. But it is within 1/16 of an inch out there at the very end, and that's definitely close enough. Cut the other side, make sure we're cutting the right section. Again, focus on perpendicularity to the workpiece, not so much the vertical line, as that line will be set to match the pin board, and it's not critical at all. So a good thing about cutting tails first is that you only need to worry about one variable, and that is the perpendicular cut, and just approximately follow that line as best you can. Okay, so there we go. We're done cutting the tails. Now, before we cut the waist out, we're going to, number one, flip these over and do the other side, but then we're actually going to mark and set the kerf on the pin board, and that will help us get exact alignment so that the pieces fit together without any gaps, and maybe more importantly, without having to do a bunch of chisel work in the end. Okay, so here we go. We've got the other side in the vise. We're going to lay these out the exact same way. Same divider setting. Mark there, mark there, mark there, mark there. And then I like to strike a line across the wood because this is, as we said, the most critical dimension right here. This is what you need to be perfectly perpendicular to your workpiece when you're cutting. The consequence of not getting it perpendicular is that, well, best case, you're going to have gaps in the joint at the end. Worst case, you're going to break some pins out because of the excess force of the wedging action of the tail. So one thing you can do is just practice on scrap. And actually, what do I mean by that, practice on scrap? Well, let's take these out and I'll show you. Okay, I've got this piece of maple here, and so one thing you can do just to practice cutting perpendicular across the board is, you know, you don't need to lay out an entire dovetail joint. Just strike a line on this board, just like this, right here. And then take your dovetail saw, go up to the line, follow the line right across the work, and just saw. Just saw. straight down, light touch with the handle, okay? Just like that. Now you've got a cut. Now check it. How close is this cut to perpendicular? Well, stick the square in. And this is actually not great. I've actually got a gap on the backside here. It's about 1/8 of an inch, so that's not good. Not everyone's gonna be perfect. Strike another line right next to it. Let's try to do a better job this time. All right, so go in. Just cut down, cut vertical. Practice your plumb cutting technique here. Okay, there we go. Let's check this one. And again, we've still got somewhat of a gap on the back end, although it's not as bad as the last one. Actually, that one I would consider acceptable. But that's what you can do, and just rinse and repeat. That's what you can do to get the feel of the saw and get better at cutting perfectly, not perfectly, but acceptably perpendicular. So let's finish these two off here. Let's finish these cuts. See if we can do a better job with these. I'm sure we can. Okay, here we go. Next, the pin boards. To lay out the pins, I'm going to start by using a little trick, and you'll see why in a moment. But we're gonna run some painter's tape along the shoulder of our tail, and that's going to help us align the shoulder of the tail with the pin board just perfectly. So let's do that. We want to do that on the inside. What I'm going to do is set the marking gauge to depth. And even though we didn't mark this with the gauge, we marked it with the square. These were cut on the crosscut sled on the table saw, and I'm fairly certain that they're close enough to parallel. Yep, that sits in, and that sits in. Okay. Yep, it's close enough to square that the marking gauge will work to do this. So 2 will be okay. I usually go 3. Ooh, my light's blinking. That's gonna keep it interesting here. So there's that. What I like to do is just cut off the excess here really quickly. Okay. Get that out of there. And then you can go in and you can take your marking gauge and run that right through the tape, like so. And what does that do? That gives you a perfect shoulder there to register the pin board against. So what we're going to do to register the pin board, get some of this out of the way here, grab a plane, reset the vise, set the vise. So then we have our pin board here, and we're gonna lay it out. So first we need to make sure. Okay, so this piece is the inside of the back, which translates to this guy right here. So they're going to fit like this, Put our pin board in the vise, line it up right with the hand plane there, and it's close. Close is not close enough, it needs to be closer than that, slightly. What's closer than close? Very close? I don't know. Mostly flat, doesn't have to be exact. But there we go. So move that back. Now we have a nice little platform to register our piece, okay? And then that shoulder comes up right up against the pin board there. So that is how we want that to register. Okay. Oh, God, my camera work is just terrible. Okay, and now for another little trick. What we're going to do, since we didn't cut this waist out, we can use the kerf here to our advantage. And in order to do that, we need to set a marking gauge to the width of our saw kerf. And that will allow us to adjust this tailboard laterally so that the saw, when we make the marks, will land right where the kerf needs to be. So I'll show you that after I change the battery in this light. Okay, we're back. Fresh battery in the light there. Now this is a trick that Rob Cosman uses, and I really like it. In fact, I use quite the method I'm using here to cut dovetails is pretty much the one he espouses. I don't have quite all of the fancy tools that he does, but the way he goes about the process makes a lot of sense to me. It may make sense to you. You may have other methods you like. That's the beautiful thing about being different in the world, but this one works for me, so I tend to use it. And what you do first is set your marking gauge to the thickness of your saw kerf. So easy way to do that is just lay it flat here on the plane. Okay. Listen for it to drop down there, just like that. Okay, and tighten. Now what we've got, where's the, there it is. No. Is just a little bit, it's just sitting, the cutter is just sitting a little bit proud there of the surface of the marking gauge. It's probably impossible to see on this. Can you see it? Just barely proud. There it is. So that is the width of our saw kerf. And what that's going to allow us to do when we set this up is as follows. If you come in here and let's say just saw right down through that tail there, and then saw right down through that, what you're going to have is a gap the width of your saw kerf on either side of the dovetail, and that is totally unacceptable. That would be noticeable for miles, and you don't want to do that. So where does the saw kerf actually need to be? Well, for this one right here, right, it needs to be over just slightly. And for this one right here, it needs to be the other direction. Okay, so that's basically what we're doing with this marking gauge. Basically what we want to do is move this on the left side, we need to move it to the right. So we set this gauge on, and that moves it to the right. And then I just come in here with my saw, just come in here, just grab the end of it. The neat thing about the Veritas saw is that it's comfortable. This plastic on top is comfortable, and just come in here, make some marks, right? And then to go the other direction, put the cutter on the pin board and register, keeping it flush to the shoulder, register the other direction. Then you can come in and take care of this side. Maybe. Okay, so now when you pull the board away, what you've got is you've got two marks here. Those are your saw, that's the start of your soft curve. So now it's a very easy matter to just go in and finish those cuts. Okay, so one thing you can do if you want to follow the lines a little bit better is you can make vertical lines right where that saw curve ends, right there, and right there. And then again, mark out your waist. For the pin board, it's going to be the center. For when, okay, and then we'll go ahead and make these cuts right on, right through the curve that we just set it in there. Oops. Follow the line. It makes the process almost automatic. Okay. Now you can grab a fret saw, come in, and cut out the majority of the waste. Okay, there we go. Okay, so now we can move on to chiseling and go from there. So once you've got the pin cut out, you can go ahead and finish the work on the tail board. So in this case, we're looking at this right here. You can remove the tape at this point, get rid of that, and come in. And remove the waste on the tail board. Parallel there. One thing I like to do, grab a chisel, create a little shoulder there for the saw to sit in, okay, and then just go straight down. This is a testy little cut here for no other reason than it's a pretty long shoulder that we've got. Normally the half pin isn't that wide, but in this case it is. And then just go in there and clean up the inside. You'll usually have just a little bit of fuzz in there. Just clean that out. And hopefully the goal is to go right from the saw to the work, to the final fit up. So hopefully that's enough. In this case it looks to be. If you do see that you left your line there, then go in with a chisel and pare down to the line. Try not to go the other direction, then you'll have gaps. Okay, so this side, yeah. Okay, so this one isn't perfect. So this one we're gonna go in with the chisel, pare down until we get it perfect. It's easy to, this is not difficult to do when you have good marks from the marking knife or the marking gauge. You can just watch where it sort of disappears, and there we go. Clean up the inside. Doesn't really need anything. Actually, I'm still, yeah, I don't want to go any further than that. Okay, so there we go. This tail is done. We'll go ahead and chisel out the pin. Moving over here. Moving over here, this is going to be a little bit interesting because instead of the pin being in sort of the end grain, we've got it in the side of the board, and so extra care needs to be taken to see what direction sort of the grain is flowing. And I can see right here that the grain is actually going this direction. It is going in like this. So I know that if I chisel from this side, I can expect the wood to follow this direction. The risk being, if we put the chisel right in the knife wall here and start chiseling, over here, it's going to exit the wood somewhere beyond, and that is not what we want. So we're going to be careful with this. We're actually going to start on this side chiseling, which we would do anyway because this is the outside. You always want to start on the outside. But the grain is running this direction, so that's going to be much, much safer. We're going to chisel from this side first, get most of the waste removed, then we can come in for the final, final pass. But we're going to start chiseling from the outside, and this will not be hard to chisel because we're basically splitting the wood versus cutting it. So very light taps with the mallet here. Okay, so you can see it already split out, but, and this is going to be somewhat instructive because as I told you before, the wood split out, but it split out that way. So we actually do not have a problem on this side. We're gonna actually continue chiseling on this side, clear up until the wall, to make sure we avoid any split out beyond the wall. Okay, so take one more narrow chunk here. Actually, you can just almost just pare down by hand. It's so easy. And then just a little bit more of the waste out of the way. Okay, so you can see here how much waste I've removed. There's less than 1/16 of an inch there, but now we will go all the way here into the gauge line, and go ahead. I'm going to use the mallet, just light taps. Keep the chisel plumb. Okay. It's always a bit nerve-wracking working with the grain like this. It's very easy to get out of shape and have the cut just take off on you and end up with gaps in the final fitting. So there we go. We've got it all the way down now. Now we can come in from the other side and start to remove that waste there. And I don't care so much if it splits back at this point because there's nothing for it to sort of grab onto, and it definitely is. It definitely is. It's definitely splitting backwards. So just take care and come in here even like this. Okay. Come in like this and just pare away. That's not a bad idea. And just get it extremely close there to the gauge line, which we are. We're about a 32nd of an inch off. Now we can go in with extreme care and just light taps. don't need to go all the way through. In fact, you risk blowing out the other side if you go all the way through with the direction that this grade is running. Okay, so there we go. Just pull it off. Okay, so there we are. And now what we can do is come back over to the vise. Back over to the vise. And from the outside. All right, let's see how flat this is. Okay, we've got some material in the center here that we're going to remove. That's okay. Just do so carefully. Be careful, take your time, retest, don't go too far. And we're still rocking. It's good there. It's good on this end. That end we're still rocking. So I'm actually going to get a smaller chisel. I don't want to risk going through, mucking up one of the ends. Make sure your chisels are sharp. Goes without saying, but you'll have a much more difficult time of this if they're not. Of course, in this instance, you can breathe on the wood and it starts to split just because of the fact that we're working with the grain. Okay, flat, and we're flat. So that is good. Side to side. Yep, that's vertical. That's vertical. So there's the pin. There's this tail. They're going to fit together like this. I'm not going to assemble the joint now, but that is how they will go. We'll do assembly when we get all of the joints finished. So we're going to do our little tape trick here on the rest of the tail shoulders, and just might as well get them all done at once and just try to go a little faster here, and that way we can set the marking gauge up one final time to the thickness of the saw curve and just use it from that point forward. Makes things go just quite a bit faster. And I'm trying to go into a decent level of detail as far as how to cut dovetails, but this is definitely not a how to cut dovetails video. It's more of a, project build that I'm doing with this grill caddy. So hopefully you're picking up, the basics on how to do it. Maybe not all of the finer points, but hopefully you get the gist of it here. And if you have more than one marking gauge, you could just leave one set up for the curve of your saw, and that would be much easier than what I'm doing here, which is having to reset it for every cut. And that's kind of a, okay, so there it is. And we can just leave this from this point. We can just leave this set like this and not readjust it. So, okay, we've got the outside here. Let's make sure. No, this is the outside. This must be the inside. Yes, it is. So readjust. Plane in. Now set this offset. So we're going to move the board left. And when we move the tail board left, we cut the right, move the tailboard left, we mark the right side. Sometimes it's a little sticky, a little tricky, a little sticky getting this guy in there, but it'll go. Just okay. There's one, and then move it to the left. And reset that wall. Move it to the left. Move it to the right to cut the left. Opposites, right? Okay, that should be good. There we go, we have our marks. So we'll go ahead and if you want the help, go ahead and mark vertical here. Right down to the line. There we go. So we can go ahead and set the saw right down into the curve. There's one. Two. Now the fret saw. Actually, we don't even need to use a fret saw on this. This is going to be so easy just to chop out. It's actually probably more difficult to cut with the grain with a fret saw than it is just to chop this out with the chisel because we are working with the long grain side. So that's what we'll do. Again, paying attention to the grain direction. It looks like what we've got here is the grain coming out this direction, so I expect if we start on this side, it's going to split out this way away from the board, which is definitely what we want. Although there is a knot here, there's some swirling. This one could be interesting, but that's why we do this. So let's go ahead, grab the chisel. Where did it go? So this is going to be easy enough just to split out here. Okay, now we can get our first sense of the direction that it's going, and I was right. It's splitting away from the wood, so that's good. See, nice and easy. Splitting away from the board, and we are safe. Chopping all the way down. Now, this end, it's not as much. I'm going to be a little more careful. This is where the grain is getting a little twisty. So help it along a little on this side, flip it back, there we go. Now we'll do the same as last time, go into the knife wall, chop down. Again, this is the inside, so normally we would be starting from the outside, but because the grain direction is not in our favor on the outside, we're safe doing this. Okay, and we'll just get it started. And then flip it over, and we can now come in from the outside. Get rid of most of the waste. Into the line. Don't want to go too far because this could split out the other side due to the grain direction. Using the mallet just gives a little bit extra control here. Rather than just trying to push down by hand, you can slip through and just punch out the other side. And then come back here and we'll take these off. Just break them out, whatever you need to do. Okay, and the grain is a little bit twisty in here. Rather than just hammering that out, we'll take it over to the vise. I know that we have excess material in here in the center to remove. Actually, the grain is going this way, so we'll go ahead and go with the grain. Okay, yeah, it's wanting to split out the back side there, so we're going to come from this side very carefully. I need to sharpen this chisel in a minute or two here. So actually, I do want to come from the other side just because of how the wood is wanting to split. There we go. That's much better. Just get the waste out of there. Test it. See if it is. Yep. Okay, so there's some rocking there. We're good there, good there. Good, almost good there. And there's rocking, definitely. Burnish it a little, you can see where it's at. So, just be very careful with this. Almost there. A little bit here to get out. And a little bit there. Okay, that should be close. All right, all right, all right. Okay, we're good. Okay, this pin board is done. Now one more to go. Finish. We can now finish the tail. It was this one. We'll remove the tape so that we don't lose track of which board that was. That would be kind of a bummer, wouldn't it? So remember, we can go back in here. Create our little valley here with the chisel and set the saw directly in line and saw right down. Clean it up. Little fuzz in there. Just get rid of that. And actually I have a little bit excess material here as well, so we need to do a little bit of pairing. And there we go. See, not perfect all the time. Rarely perfect, in fact. And this. At least that went into the waste. That's the reason you keep your hand over here. Keep it from springing the wrong direction here. All right. Just get rid of Okay. Now one thing we can do that I didn't show you on the last one, but helps when fitting the joint, is actually you can cut just a little chamfer on the underside of this tail. Don't go clear through the top, otherwise you'll see that when the joint's finished, but just, you know, 1/8 inch down or so, just take a little bit off there. That'll help fit the joint together in the final fitting. So there we go, another tail board down. All right, the second pin board here is going to be done in the exact same manner as the first, so we're not going to show all of that. This video is already getting mighty long, but I did want to get through the dovetail cutting and chiseling and all of that. So hopefully you got to see how that process is completed here and some of the tricky things we have to consider when working with the grain on the pin board. In the next part, we will actually get to assembly, so you'll get to see how this all comes together. We'll do the glue up and clamp it together, and you don't want to miss making the dowels. So check out the next part in the series. It'll be linked here at the end of this video, and like and subscribe. Thanks.